You know, there's a part of me that wants to wait until it goes exactly to 6 o'clock, but I can't for any reason say that that's practical. It's kind of like I see this 5:59 and there's this pain in me of like, gotta wait, have to make it official, but I don't think we do. So anyways, no, thank you all so much for your time and for being here. And I guess really, you know, for me, I want to make it succinct. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'm aiming at probably like an hour and 20 minutes maximum. Um, I've got, just because of some of the previous experiences that I had with these Zoom meetings, I realized that a lot of times sending the questions in ahead of time allows it to be a little bit more orderly. But the way I feel is that we'll get through these questions that were emailed to me, and then you know, we can just do an open forum, because I mean, personally, I'm sort of inclined towards that format, anyways. But one thing I did want to mention this year, for whatever reason, I kind of have a theory, but it was horrible for swarming. I don't know how many of you experienced that as well. We were probably able to, this is pretty unscientific, I'm just going off the top of my head. I think our swarming rate was maybe around 15%, maybe, yeah, probably about 18% in our yards. But there's a lot of swarming. And I mean, something that was surprising to me is just even, I don't know how many of you have been following that series, Following a Nuke Through a Season, even though technically it's its second season now. But so we have the original nuke with the original queen from last year, which we'll have to replace here probably a little later in the summer. But then we had two splits that were both given new queens. They're both given new queens this spring. And when I went to check them here yesterday or the day before, I just uploaded it on our YouTube channel. I think it was 2 days ago, yesterday, whatever. Two of the three hives had swarm cells, which blew me away. And I think a lot of that has to do with the bees got all ramped up with the nice weather that we had in April and then into May. And they also got some teaser flows. Like, it was a really good maple flow this year in our area. And so I think between that and then just this weather, it's kind of cooling down again, because, you know, bees are so much like people in the sense that, you know, if you get them all hyped up about a honey flow or good weather and everything, and they start brooding up, and then the weather turns bad, you can have a large population of bees just kind of crammed into that hive, and they get swarmy. And so if you have like what we're getting now, it's kind of cold, little bit, breaks the sunshine, but kind of rainy. And then you get a span of really nice days with the blackberry flow now in full swing. You're going to have issues with swarming again. So I would say probably that's the biggest thing that we're all needing to watch for. We're having to watch for in our own colonies, is just really having to watch for swarm cells. And obviously, swarm cells, it takes 10 days from the time the egg is, wait a minute, 10 days, 2 days, 3 days, had to think about this. 3 days after the egg is laid before it hatches. And then by day 7, around thereabouts, it's capped. Day 14, give or take, if it's warmer, sometimes they'll hatch earlier, but 14 days for them to hatch. So if you're checking your bees at least every 10 days, every 9 days, you can keep on top of the swarm cells. And that's just a really important thing to do. Okay, enough talking and monologuing here. Sean asks, and you all can hear me, everything's good, we're cool, awesome. Sean asks, 12 days ago, my hive split via a swarm, go figure. As of yesterday, there were no signs of eggs or larvae, but there was still some capped brood. There are also 2 capped queen cells in the hive. If the queen cells hatch, but the queen doesn't successfully mate and is only laying drones, my concern is that a lot of time will have passed a point since the last worker cells would have been laid and hatched. So how much time would I have at that point to buy a new queen? So let me share my screen here real quick and show show you what, just for those of you who may not know what a swarm cell looks like or not confident. Can you all see that? Can you see my, okay. So there's a swarm cell. Here's kind of an interesting, so this is what a cell, a queen cell looks like. Let me move this out of the way. Here's what a queen cell looks like after it's hatched. It'll be open, obviously, but then it'll be a perfectly cut circle. Here is another really important feature. Thank you so much, Google, for making my life easy. This is great. These here are queen cells that have been destroyed by the queen. Now, just looking at this, if I had to guess, I can't see. You can see where my pointer is on my phone or on the computer. I can't see the other side of this cell, so maybe it's torn down like this. But from this side, it looks like this one hatched first, and then she immediately attacked and destroyed these other cells. So if you check your bees and you're seeing queen cells like that, that means that you have either the virgin queen tearing them down, or it might even be the original queen. But whatever the case, you have an active queen, virgin or mated, in your hive if you're seeing that. Here's another good picture of what swarm cells can look like on the bottom of the frames. And you know, a lot of times it's really perfectly normal, especially around a honey flow and everything, where you'll have queen cups that look very similar to this, but there's two factors. Obviously, you look inside of it, see if there's an egg, see if there's royal jelly. Obviously, if there's an egg, if there's royal jelly, it's an active swarm cell. So then you have to go into the kind of gauging or judging whether you want to let that swarm cell develop and hatch, or you know, take it, make splits out of it, or destroy them because you're wanting to keep the original queen. You know, it's kind of up to you what you're wanting to do at that point. But the other thing too is that active swarm cells will oftentimes have nice white wax, especially around the edge. I don't know if you can kind of see on this one a little bit, it's a little bit whiter, but a lot of people don't realize that beeswax is actually starts off as white. The reason it has this darker color is actually from the footprints, if you will, that the bees had, like pollen, propolis, and different, just even dust and what have you, that darkens the color of that wax. Getting back to Sean's question, as far as at what point have you reached a point of no return? That's a really good question. So from the time, if your hive is swarmed, either you've seen it swarm, or you know, you go out there and you find a bunch of cap cells and it looks like a bunch of your bees are missing. The general rule is, go back here to my original. How the heck do you? Is that? Yeah, whatever. I'll just leave it like this. Um, from the time a virgin queen hatches in queen breeding operations, the standard rule is usually, was it 18 days or something like that. A lot of queen breeders that are kind of taking that extra step to make sure that their queens are laying well will wait up to 21 days. But really, from the time she hatches, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, you should at that point, especially this time of the year, because you know we get good sunny breaks. Prime mating weather for queens is around 70 degrees or higher. So 2.5 weeks from the time you feel your bees swarm is a good time to look and see eggs. Some of the indications that you might have a queen, a virgin queen that is in the process of getting mated and what have you, is they'll actually start clearing out a brood area in the center of the frame, which let me see here. Like say, say this picture here, but say, this isn't capped, this is all open. You'll actually see the bees start to polish the cells. They'll start looking like they have a mirror finish. And so that's another indication that you might have a virgin queen that hasn't either yet mated or hasn't started laying yet, but they're getting ready. Just even the behavior of the bees will be quiet. They won't be loud. They won't be aggressive. They'll just be content. They'll just come across as totally content. I would say after about 3 weeks, especially this time of the year, then you're getting into a bit of a tight spot, because if she did not mate, or if she got killed or whatever else, at that point, the bees are going to start panicking, and you're going to have issues with drone layers start to emerge, which are just worker bees that, because of the lack of queen pheromone, their ovaries will actually start to develop, and they will start laying eggs themselves, which obviously are unfertilized, so it'll just be drones. It's really difficult at that point. One guy I know, and I'm actually experimenting with this myself on a hive that we were actually using for raising queen cells, and then I just didn't get around to requeening them. And so it's a really strong hive. So I started having some workers to lay eggs. And so I actually just transferred a couple of frames with eggs from another hive, and figured, just let them make queen cells. I really didn't have time to mess with it much more than that. But there was a guy that said if you have access to queen cells, you can throw queen cells in a drone layer, and they'll accept her because she's hatching, they're there. But buying a mated queen can really be risky, because if you have bees that are drone laying, they're not going to accept a mated queen. And you also have to be very fastidious about shaking the bees off of every frame to make sure they don't have any kind of queen cell started. Because if they have a queen cell started, they're going to kill any mated queen that you try to introduce. So it's just really not a good situation. If your bees swarm and after about 3 weeks or so, you're not seeing any eggs or what have you. I would even venture to say if you have a second hive, probably just maybe look at joining the two just with some, I almost said toilet paper, newspaper, even though you probably could use toilet paper. But, after last year, toilet paper is like using money. So, you can't do that. Okay. Gottfried asks, how can you restore a hive? Oh, speaking of it, how can you restore a hive with a drone laying worker or workers? I have tried shaking all the bees in tall grass several hundred feet from the hive. The assumption is the workers will find their way back to the hive, but the layers cannot fly well enough to get back. You know what? I vaguely, the gentleman that taught me, my first mentor, he was like late 70s, been beekeeping commercially for like 50 years. I vaguely remember something like this, and that would actually be really interesting to try, Gottfried. Yeah, I mean, usually I know in the past, whenever we came across a drone layer, we would just usually just shake the bees out and just take the equipment away and just let the bees, do wherever they wanted to go, or merge into other hives, or just even go back to where the hive was, and then just slowly die out. But that might actually be a good option. I really think the only other option besides shaking a drone lane colony out, just shaking the bees out, the only other option besides what you've just recommended or tried would be using a queen cell. But I would be interested. I'd be interested in you getting back to me and letting me know if that works for you, if you've tried that before, because it's interesting. Bees bees are fascinating. I just you never stop learning. Okay, Donnell, I believe I'm saying your name right. I have discovered small black beetles in my packaged bees that I purchased. This hive sits away from the 2 nukes I purchased from you. So my question are the following. What do you guys recommend for treatment of the little black buttheads? Do I need to treat all 3 hives? I have not found them in the other hives yet. I know this is a little risky searching for things on Google here without some kind of filter, but I'm going to see if I can, just so you guys have a reference. Small hive beetles. Yeah, that's the musical ones. There we go. Small hive beetles. So that's how the small hive beetle looks. I have seen them from time to time. Not very common. One of the fortunate things that we have here in Washington, at least in our area, is that the weather's or it gets cold enough in the fall, winter time for these really not to be an issue. In the southern states, they become a major issue because they can they're just nasty. I mean, you can see some of the larvae here, and then they poop, and just it's nasty. They get into pollen sub. But one thing that I need to point out, and I'm surprised I actually didn't have a chance to harp on this yet, because those of you who know me know that this is a big deal, and it needs to be a big deal. You're not going to have issues with hive beetles. You may have the odd hive beetle in your hive that you get. Hopefully not, but you may. But they're not going to be an issue for your bees if your bees are healthy. And the biggest thing in making sure your bees are healthy is mites. mites, treating mites. And that's actually something I can email out maybe a little bit later here in the year. I'll mail out a copy of our treatment schedule, which just off the top of my head, we treat end of March, beginning of April. Then we treat the end of July. We treat again at the beginning of September, and we treat again with oxalic acid in usually around the beginning of December. The other 3 treatments, we usually are using Apivar, which the active ingredient is amitraz, and we just find that to be the most consistent treatment method that's getting us consistent results. Our bees this year are looking better than we have ever seen them, and that can be boiled down to 2 things especially, and that is mite treatments. We're keeping our mite counts ridiculously low because of our treatment schedule, and then also our nutrition, just really dialing in the nutrition, especially the nutrition when you're really needing to substitute that nutrition is in the early fall and in the early spring, before they have really much natural to forage on. Because I mean, no matter what kind of pollen sub you're using or probiotics or whatever else, there's no substitute for your bees having a multi-floral foraging opportunity with pollen, nectar, and what have you. Once our maple flow comes around, and if the bees are able to access it because of the weather, you're going to be in a really good spot. Okay, so Nancy, is all this making sense so far? guys, is this good? Okay, cool, 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 cool. All right. So let's see here. Nancy sent me a list of 6 or 7 questions here, but they're really good. And oh, I see you have actually a question about the hive beetle. Yeah, they're not really a big deal where we are. And on the eastern part of the state, it gets even colder there. So, I mean, the only real issue that I know that people have with hive beetles are like in California, and then obviously in the southern states, mid south, southeast, whatever. A question that was coming up here a fair amount was about queen excluders, and that is it's a really good question. So we use queen excluders for certain management techniques, mainly for making splits. And what that looks like is, like, say when we bring our bees back from California and they're doubles, we throw an excluder between the 2 boxes and come back in 3 days usually. There's a few different ways we do this, but one of the ways is we come back in 3 days. Probably actually 4 days is preferable, because once again, it takes an egg 3 days to hatch. Come back 3rd, 4th day, and we pull a frame or 2 from the top box and look for eggs. And if we see eggs and we know the queen is in that top box, we set it aside and we pull the bottom box and take it as the split, give it a new queen. And so we use it just for kind of management manipulations. A couple of YouTube channels that come to mind that use single brood box honey producing hives. They'll have all their bees in one brood box with an excluder and then honey supers. The name of the one YouTube channel is a Canadian beekeeper's blog. I believe it is Canadian beekeeper's blog. Let me see here. Canadian beekeeper's blog. And then the other one is Ontario, Canadian beekeeper's blog. And he is a great guy. He's actually up in the province where I originally started keeping bees, Manitoba, Canadian beekeeper's blog. And then the other one is University of Guelph Beekeeping, and they also use a single, and this is a great YouTube channel as well. I mean, these videos are done really professionally, done really well. And he's got a couple of videos on how to manage bees using a queen excluder. Traditionally, queen excluders are oftentimes referenced as a honey excluder. And the reason for that being is that it's a weird thing. If you have a really strong hive and they're double deeps, and you put a queen excluder and then then honey supers, they just have a resistance to crossing over that excluder. And I know of tons of guys, myself included, that even though they will put some honey above it, it really cuts down on their productivity. So in order to be really efficient for using honey supers when doing honey production, you need to do them above a single deep brood chamber. But you have to have your timing right to make sure that your bees aren't going to swarm. I know my mentor, he ran around 600, 700 hives himself back in like the 40s and 50s. And he told me what he would actually have to do is go out once a week and pull 2 or 3 frames of the capped brood from the bottom and transfer it, shake the bees off, transfer it above the excluder, bring some empty frames down into the brood box so that the queen continually had space for laying. And I don't know about you, but we're running around 1,100 hives right now, and the thought of doing that, the thought of doing that would just, it would paralyze me, and I probably want to sell the operation. So, but anyways, hopefully that helps. We just installed an ice machine. It started behind me, and I was wondering what in the world that was. Okay, treatment plan and products. We kind of checked with that. Like I said, I really wish that we had more options than we've got a bunch of different mite treatment options, but the only one that I've seen that is consistent is the Apivar. It really blows my mind that in beekeeping catalogs, this is a little pet peeve of mine, that you still have ads for what is it called? Well, anyway, Checkmite. Checkmite's another one, and then what was the Apistan? There we go. Apistan strips and Checkmite strips. We were using those 13, 14 years ago commercially, and they stopped working. And I just asked a bunch of my commercial colleagues, I said, did they reformulate this or something that this is still on the market? And to all the best of their knowledge, they hadn't. So, I mean, it's annoying to me that varroa mites are public enemy number one in the beekeeping community. And yet you have all of this plethora of products for treating them that aren't necessarily effective. And, you know, the what was it, what did I just say? Apistan and Checkmite are perfect examples. It just blows my mind that that's still on the market. So I suggest Apivar. The reason that we use oxalic acid in December is because that's when the bees are the most likely to be broodless. And so we use it then. Oxalic acid vaporization or sublimation, whatever you want to call it, is very, very effective. But the oxalic acid crystals that form when you sublimate it into a hive last around 48 hours, give or take. And so, you know, the recommended dosages, even one year that I used it in the summer, was to treat every 5 days or every 7 days, 3 times or whatever. You're going to miss a bunch of mites, and your bees are most likely going to die. And so, you know, that's another thing where oxalic acid is a very useful treatment, but it needs to be used when the bees are either broodless, or there was one guy that I know that was treating his bees in the summer with oxalic acid, but he was doing a treatment every 3 days, so that there was active oxalic acid crystals that the mites that are hatching out of the cap brood could be exposed to. And he was doing 10 treatments every 3 days, one treatment every 3 days, 10 times in a row, covering a 30-day period. Here's some math, right? Drones take 28 days. That's the longest cycle for any type of honeybee, you know, out of the queens, worker bees, drone. So you have a 28-day, he was covering 30 days of keeping active oxalic acid crystals in the hive to control the mites. That makes sense. If you want to do that, you know, try it. You know, oxalic acid, fortunately, has shown, especially when being sublimated, has shown to really not have that much of a stressor on the bees at all. It kind of agitates them initially, but you know, anyway. So that's kind of a thing. You just really, the mites is the big thing, number one thing. You get the mites out of the way, the other stuff just seems to pale actually in comparison in significance. Moving bees or splitting, how come they don't go back to the hive that you took them from? Now, I'm not sure the context of that. It usually, when we're splitting our bees, we'll take them to a new yard. If you have a couple of hives and you're not wanting to go through the effort of finding a new yard, but you're wanting to split them, there's nothing wrong with actually, here's a comparison. Say you have, this is your original hive, and there's the beautiful yellow. Here's your original hive that you're wanting to split, and the entrance is facing this way, and so the bees are used to flying in and out this way. If you find the queen in here, and like I said, that's where you can use a queen excluder. Find the queen in here, take the box that she's in, turn the entrance around and face it this way, and then leave the bees that you're going to give a new queen to or whatever as your new split here, with the entrance continuing to face that way. Here's the hive with the old queen. Have that entrance face 180 degrees away this way. And because this one already has an active queen, has a brood that's hatching or whatever, the field force of these bees will build up rather quickly. But the one that you're splitting and giving the new queen to is going to have all of the resources of all the old field bees coming back to this colony. So that's a way that you can keep two colonies in the same yard that you're splitting. It's a real simple way. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Let's see here. This is from Cassie. Cassie or Casey? I think Cassie. When does a swarm matter? Let me check the, I want to check the timer real quick, because like I said, I'd like to see, oh, okay, we're doing good on time. I'd like to have, 10, 15 minutes or what have you, if we have some questions here. Questions about swarm management. When does a swarm matter? Can a colony still make it through the winter if part of the colony leaves? So ideally, my mind's going in a few different, there's a guy I know who is in the Port Angeles area, Bremerton, actually, I think more Bremerton. He was showing me he had figured out a way to winter 3 frames of bees in these little colonies. So, there you go. I mean, potentially it's possible if you have 3 frames of bees and a good queen, you can overwinter them. Ideally, what I would look for is you're wanting a full deep box of bees. That seems to be the minimum that we aim for. Usually what we do is around the beginning of August, we're doing our mite treatments, we're doing our feeding, even sometimes the end of July, depends on the weather. But mite treatments, we're starting to feed our bees. Any hive that's really under 4 or 5 frames of bees, we're just going to cull. We're just going to shake them out. There's probably something wrong with them. Even if it is something like it was a late swarm, it's best to find a colony that, say, is 1 box of bees, and then join those 4 or 5 frames of bees above them with newspaper method, which hopefully you guys probably have heard about. Paper method of joining bee colonies. Let's see here. See if we can. Yeah, I mean, just more or less, you're just putting a piece of newspaper over it. I take my hive tool, make just 1 or 2 small little slits in the newspaper, and then put the colony on top that I'm trying to join. Really, really essential, especially if you're angry at the news. This is a really essential thing to use, but it really is. It's an essential management thing to know how to do. So, I mean, yeah, look for a box of bees going into winter. I would say anything less than a box of bees in a standard deep super after mid-August, say the beginning of September, it's gonna start getting a little bit iffy on their ability to survive, especially if they're having to have a virgin queen mate. Signs and symptoms of a potential swarm. We kind of went over that with the, just look for swarm cells. And your swarm cells are almost always kind of referencing one of these pictures. Say this is your bottom box here, and this is your second box. Swarm cells are almost always between the two boxes on the bottom frames of the second box. However, if you do see swarm cells here and you want to be really fastidious to make sure they don't swarm, you're going to want to take out every frame individually, shake the bees off of them, and check the face of the frames as well as the bottom and the sides too. I mean, it's amazing. You can get swarm cells. Let's see here. You can get swarm cells that are right hiding along the sides of the frames, and they are sometimes, like, see here, you have a classical one on the bottom, but I mean, I've seen swarm cells right along here in the sides, and bees will cover them. They'll cover them to protect them or to keep them warm, but usually just to protect them from the queen. So yeah, you just have to be really, really diligent about checking for those if you're wanting to keep your bees from swarming. Okay, so here's a question about nectar flow in our area. I hear the blackberry blooms are a major nectar flow in our area. What are other sources during the summer? What should the beekeeper look for and have on hand in preparation for the nectar flow? So you have some, trying to remember the name of that. It looks like a dandelion, but it's technically not. It's a little bit higher. Anyways, foraging that. Snowberries, my wife and I actually just went doing a little bit of mushroom hunting, not that far from here, and you should have seen the honeybees on the snowberries. There's, clover, a lot of the, was it white blossom or the Dutch lawn clover, whatever, the little white clover that you see in yards. It's kind of the only ones that come to my mind right now, even though I'm sure there's others. But the blackberry flow is really the big thing right now. It's just starting. And the biggest thing to have on hand is room. Have supers, have frames. A really good thing to do as well, especially if you have drawn out frames. And maybe some of you checker boarding frames, because you have to be careful when you're giving bees. There's a perfect example. When you're giving bees a box full of new foundation, sometimes bees will actually be prone to swarm over going up and building out that foundation. So one of the ways that you can help avoid that or minimize the risk of that is taking a frame or two. Usually I would take it from the sides because they're not going to have brood in it. Usually your side frames have honey, pollen. And I'll take one or two of these frames on the side and put it in the center of the new box, the rest being all new foundation, and take those two new foundation frames and maybe throw them in the middle of the bottom box. Because if you put a frame of foundation in the middle of a really strong colony and they've got brood on both sides, they're going to draw that out immediately to continue to provide room for the queen to lay. So checkerboarding definitely helps minimize the some of the resistance and reluctance that bees have sometimes drawing out foundation. But really just have room. That's the biggest thing. Just continue to give them room. And another really good thing to do, especially if you only have a handful of hives, is I think it's called under supering a hive. Here, I'll just illustrate. So under supering a hive would be something along the lines, okay, say this picture here, where this guy's got, his two brood chambers, he has his honey super here. So if he opens this up and he sees that the bees are, filling up the box 3/4 of the way, or it looks like, yeah, it looks like half to 3/4 of the frames are starting to be drawn out. What he can do is put the fourth super where this third one is and move this third one above the new super. Now, because this one they've already started working on, having this super now that has drawn comb and they've been working on in between a new box with new foundation, that's going to really motivate the bees to draw that out. It also opens up space immediately, especially if they're starting to plug this one. So that's kind of the risk you run with. I mean, once again, in our operation, we don't have the time or the manpower to always be throwing supers underneath. So what we try and do is be really proactive and say, okay, you know what? We're going to check these bees again in a week and a half. So if we look in this time of the year, we have third deep boxes, some fourth deep boxes on. If we're going out, if my guys are going out and seeing that the third box is maybe a quarter full or a half full with bees and that they're starting to actively work that third box, they're going to throw a fourth one on just so that there's no chance of them getting plugged out with honey. They're going to have lots of room to continue moving forward. What should the beekeeper look for in the hive after the big flows to gauge how they did and whether they'll make it over winter? You know what, and this is a really good question, follow-up question. Do you recommend harvesting honey on a first-year colony? When and how much? Um, yeah, you can harvest as much honey as you want off of a first-year colony. Obviously, anything that you take from them, you're going to have to substitute yourself with syrup. Um, here's the name of a really interesting guy to research if you feel so inclined, and his name is Tim Ives, and he is a really interesting guy. If you look at some of the pictures of his video here, you'll see these hives are just stacked high. His operating philosophy, and here, this isn't what we do. What we do is we take anything above the second deep. So we winter our bees. All our bees are managed in double deep boxes for winter, overwinter. That's even what they go down in California for the almond pollination with. But anything above that second deep, we pull. And then we gauge the weight of the colony. For a double deep, you're wanting to have a gross weight of around 120 pounds going into winter. And so you can kind of gauge it by that. We'll sometimes just even tip the hive, grab the handholds on the bottom hive and then just tip it up to kind of see where they're at. But around that 120 pounds for doubles, around 75, 80 pounds for a single. That's what we do. So there was one commercial operation that I worked with that we used to actually go into the brood chambers and pull honey frames and replace them with empty frames and then feed them with, sucrose, regular table or white sugar, along with, some other stuff we put in there. So there's a different multitude of ways. The biggest thing is whatever you take from your bees out of honey, you obviously have to replenish that yourself to make sure they're set up for winter. Getting back to Tim Ives, this guy has a really interesting theory, and I would actually like to experiment with it at some point. And that is that he winters most of his bees in either triples, so three deeps, I think even possibly 4 deeps sometimes. But what he claims to have found, and this guy, he runs around 150 hives, I think, or 200 hives. What he said he was finding is that the bees kept a much larger colony when they had larger amounts of stores. Um, and that they would also build up quicker in the spring because they would have those extra stores of honey. And I mean, really, I mean, how can you say that us feeding sugar syrup is going to have the same nutritional value as honey that the bees have gotten? I mean, there's no way. So that's where, like in our operation, we've kind of compromised a bit by saying we're not going to pull any honey frames from our double deeps. Anything the bees have in there that they forage themselves, they get to keep. I really feel that we do see a return on our investment for any money that we would get from that honey. I feel is potentially offset by the demise of the proper nutrition for our bees. So anyways, hopefully that makes sense. But Tim Ives, really interesting. I think if you Google his name, I'm trying to figure out how I get back to the regular screen. New share. Not that it really matters. I was just kind of wanting to see some of you guys. But anyway, so yeah, so that's you can extract honey from a first year colony. Just be aware of them having a good wintering weight. Do you split all your hives every year? We just split the hives that need to be split, just as a, obviously swarm prevention, also as a way of us expanding our operation. Average lifespan of a queen, we keep all of our queens around the 1 year mark. That's another key part to just having bees that are performing at their best. Mites, number one, followed by nutrition, and then obviously your genetics, making sure that your queens obviously are having good genetics and also are young. They're young, they're virile. It's a beautiful thing when you see a new queen starting to get her nest established and just taking off. I mean, it's an absolutely beautiful thing. I have another question here, and then we'll go into some questions. Because what time are we running into here? I'll just check my phone. Yeah, so that's pretty well right on time. Where'd this question go? How often do you check your hives in June, July, and August? So once again, this is one of the more relaxing times of the year for us, because really the biggest thing we're focusing on is making sure the bees have room. We pop the lid, look in the box. Does it look like I said, this time of year, if there's a box, the top box has a quarter to a half full of bees, we'll probably throw another super on just so that we don't risk them getting plugged out with honey. But really just, watching for that and trimming the yards. The grass is growing ridiculously. So just keeping the grass trimmed around the hives. The next busy part for us, kind of busy part, will be we have a gentleman actually that's just joining our company full time this coming week. And one of the first things he's going to be doing is going out with another one of our guys, and they're going to be marking hives that are underperforming. And what those underperforming hives are going to look like is any hive that is only still 2 boxes of bees, and they're really not doing anything, they're really not growing, they're really not foraging. So they're going to check those, make sure there's not a disease issue or what have you. But we're going to mark those and requeen them with queen cells from our breeder colony, which is from Dr. Joe Latshaw in Ohio. He's one of the preeminent bee geneticists, bee breeders, absolutely brilliant guy. Yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing. And then obviously around second week of July, third week of July, we'll start pulling honey. And then that's really when it starts getting busy. And it's also when I'm really looking forward to having 2 or 3 young guys who want to show off how strong they are to help us with that. Because I'll tell you what, me and Bo, we pulled honey last year. It was just the two of us. Well, we had one other guy came out, Tyler, and helped us. And I'll tell you what, it kicked our butt. I used to be able to go out and pull honey for 12, 14 hours a day in the summer heat and no problem. But that is obviously in my past. And I'm not disappointed about that either. So anyway, okay, so let's go to uh, some questions here. And you know what? Maybe just to keep it orderly, if anyone has a question, why don't you just say so here in the chat box, and then I'll just call out your name and you can unmute it. That way, I'm just thinking, keep 4 or 5 people from trying to talk at the same time. There is a message here of how do you spell apivar, and it is APIVAR. Here, I'll put it in the, yeah, it's called apivar. But now with that said too, if I just did such a brilliant job of communicating that nobody has questions, I mean, I'll take that too. But I'm married, so I highly doubt that. See what? Okay, so here we go. So you use Appear for March or Apivar, yeah, for March, April, July, September, and use oxalic acid, such as Dayton. So, so what I use here, I'm going to go again with the screen share. What we use for the, come on, there we go. What we use, where did Chrome go? Here we go. What's it called? ProVap 110. I want to, still. That's what we use for applying our, where is it? Here it is. I mean, it's a little bit more pricey. I think it was around $400 or $500, but this is what we use. You can use like the ones for $100 or what have you. I don't see any issue with that. This one was a little bit quicker. It uses 120 volts. And then this is the company that we order our oxalic acid from. What's their name? Some Florida laboratories. And I mean, that's the awesome thing about oxalic acid is it's ridiculously cheap. I mean, I can't remember what it ends up being per treatment, but I mean, it's like single cents cash wise for the treatment. So it's now what we're looking at probably doing for this year is going to trying to remember what they call it, oxalic acid, like Canon, commercial, I don't even know if it would be on, well, here's a video of what it looks like. But we're going to go to this probably for this year because this is way quicker. You can just keep going down your line of hives and you'll see it here. This is that Canadian Beekeepers blog. And they've kind of upgraded this so that it's not as bulky and cumbersome. Now they actually have a DeWalt blower that's right on this part that you just use, and it just blows the vapor into the hive. Once the hive has a good saturation of vapor, then you just move on to the next one. And it's really fast, it's quick, it's efficient. So we're going to upgrade to that for this next treatment. But yeah, apivar strips, which by the way, I've had a bunch of people ask me, you always are wearing Man Lake hats and blah blah blah. Do you is that who you're? I don't know if they think I'm sponsored by. I wish I was. I buy enough stuff from them that they should sponsor me. But they're kind of like the Walmart of the beekeeping world. And do with that comment as you will. But I do buy a lot of stuff from them. But yeah, Apivar looks like they've got a sale going on right now. But yeah, that seems to be kind of the most efficient thing. And let me go back here to the chat here and see what. Hopefully that helped you, Michael. What type of tree or bush is a swarm looking for? So here's a great. I'm just reading your comment too, Duncan, before I do this screen share again. But one thing I wanted to show you here, talking about swarm behavior, if you feel yourself, if you're inclined towards reading, check out this book, Honeybee Democracy by Tom Seeley. This book is all about how bees communicate when they're swarming, and it is fascinating. So he goes into when a swarm initially leaves a hive, they are more or less just looking for a place to settle and kind of gather, and then the scout bees start looking for other areas. He goes into incredible detail of how specific they are for what they're looking for, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. I want to say it's 15-liter, I don't know, something like that. But anyway, so yeah, no, when a swarm initially just leaves, they're just looking for a place to congregate, kind of get everybody together, get the queen there, and then they start sending out scouts. And so that's sort of the way they're going. So they don't really, I mean, there was one bee, or I don't know if any of you saw it on the Facebook page, where they had settled on a county sign, which it's really no reason. It was just, well, the only reason was the nearest high point by the hives. So they settled on the sign while they're looking for a place to go. So Duncan, I remember, I want to say that your question was, swarm 3 days ago. How long should I wait to open the hive and take a look after I caught the swarm? I'd say a week. If they've got good room in there, like if you transferred them where they've got, frames that they need to build everything else, I'd say wait a week, let them get situated, and then check for eggs and just see how they're doing. Could you send a link for the equipment for the oxalic acid vaporizer? I'm unfamiliar with using that method. Yeah, no problem at all. And then Nancy, how long does it take for bees to cap honey? Let me just see if I can find this. So I'm going to go back to Man Lake, but once again, like I said, it's kind of like the Walmart. It's the easy place to go. But Dayton, I just got in a bunch of Dayton smokers, and the quality is second to none. I mean, they're absolutely great. So Dayton is another really good one. Like I said, Man Lake has just done a really good branding job, and so that's kind of where my mind goes. It's sort of like the Amazon, just sort of automatically go there. But let me see, oxalic acid. Okay, so I'm sending. Oxalic acid vaporizers. So while I get that, Nancy asked, how long does it take? Okay, here we go. I'll put this link here in the chat. Nancy asked how long it takes for bees to cap honey. It kind of depends upon how heavy the flow is, but probably, I don't know. That's a really good question. I would venture to say they could probably do it in 3 or 4 days. Because I'm thinking back in Canada, when we put bees on canola fields, I mean, we'd have like a section, 640 acres, 600, whatever, a section, an acre, section of canola. The bees could fill a deep box in like 2 or 3 days. Now, the capping of it would probably take a little while longer after that. And that's also, we backtrack, that's also too why when you have a honey flow going on, you want to err on giving the bees more space, because you think about that when they get that nectar in, they're having to evaporate the moisture content to below 18% for it to be stored well and not ferment. So, you know, that honey, kind of like making maple syrup, the nectar that they're bringing in is going to have major shrinkage by the time it's converted to honey. So when they're bringing in that unripened nectar, they have to have a lot of space to store it as they're evaporating the extra moisture out of it. So that's another real good reason. Oh yeah, really good question. What are the health hazards of vaporizing oxalic acid versus using it in a liquid format? You want to suit up as in you want to have, what we do is we have the full mask protection, let's see here, see if I can find it here. And then we use the 3M cartridges for the, let's see, full face gas mask. And I'll tell you, it's a horrid thing to have to wear, you know, for treating, but it sure is better than destroying your lungs. Yeah, oxalic acid, you want to be really careful with. I mean, if you get a whiff of it or something like that, it'll take your breath away. It's probably not going to do any substantial harm to you, but you definitely want to minimize your exposure to it as much as possible. I mean, here too, like even something that we've done is just even having the 3M gas mask. We'll even just use these sometimes with obviously the organic. Here they are with the organic. Make sure, I can't remember the reading. Make sure that the ones that you get are rated for oxalic acid, but you know, organic vapor, that should be the one. But use those, and then just really good sealed eye protection, because it can irritate your eyes. The sublimation is just, you're more likely to get good coverage of the bees using sublimation versus liquid. And so that's one of the, you know, Randy Oliver has been doing some really great things, and with the oxalic acid shop towels. And here's his link, which is just scientificbeekeeping.com. And I just put that in the chat box too. It's a really good. Josh asked, what are you feeding in the late summer and fall? I got a really good deal on white sugar. I bought, oh gee, I think we had like 16,000 pounds of it or something. I got a really good deal on last year. So we've burned through a lot of that. We've got a little bit left, like we've got maybe 5,000-6,000 pounds left that we'll be feeding to our bees. And if you go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/high5bees, we actually have a video there of the process we use a trash pump for mixing it. But so it's a mixture of either sucrose, or we also use HFCS55. We pick it up from the Cargill sweetener plant up in Seattle. And it's a mixture of 55% high fructose corn syrup and then a mixture of glucose and sucrose. And what we do is we also put a gallon and a half of apple cider vinegar in each 250-gallon tote. And the apple cider vinegar really helps prevent nosema and just really helps the overall health of the honeybee. The ratio is really, you're looking at I believe it's 2 tablespoons. Yeah, let's go with that. I mean, if you have a little extra, it's not going to hurt the bees. I believe it's 2 tablespoons for every gallon of syrup, roughly, is what you're looking for when you're adding apple cider to your syrup. It's, see, I'm blanking out here. I think it's 1 part per 100, 1 part apple cider to per 100 parts of syrup. And that's really all we do with our syrup. I mean, you have a bunch of different additives that you can take, and I have no doubt that they each have their good thing to it. But just for what we do, we find that a good pollen sub, which which by the way, a lot of you have maybe heard me mention NutriBee, and the gentleman who makes it down in California only sells it by the pallet, 2,000-pound pallet of it. But he told me the other year, or this spring, that he's fine with me reselling it up here. And so we're going to try and have that available in August, probably. We'll probably just sell it in, I don't know, like 1-pound blocks or something like that. But having that really good pollen sub, because it has probiotics in it, the guy is brilliant. He knows bee nutrition inside and out. And so between that and then making sure that our syrup is good quality, has that apple cider in it. The apple cider, what it does is it lowers the pH of the honeybee's gut, so that the bacteria, the nosema, cannot replicate as easily. It just makes it a more of a hostile environment in the what do they call it, the microflora of the honeybee's gut. So really, and that's the biggest thing. The other thing, and I just need to harp on this one more time, and that is mite treatments. Do not treat your bees any later than the first week of August. Don't do it. I mean, I don't care. In our operation, if we get to the 3rd week of July and we still have a strong honey flow, chances are really good, probably by the 4th week, definitely. If we come to the end of July, which I can't think of it happening in our area, if we came to the 4th week of July and I still had a strong honey flow, I would still pull the honey supers and start treating. That is so essential. So just make sure, get your mite treatments, even if you're wanting to use other types, whatever, but just make sure that you do that first good initial treatment the end of July, 1st week of August at the absolute latest, and then do a follow-up one in the beginning of September. That's really important. 2 more quick questions here, and then I'll let you guys go. And that is, Duncan asked, is it okay to open up a hive on a cooler day, or is it better to wait for 70s? Really good question. It can be like 45, 50 degrees. And if it's sunny out and there's no wind, you can pull a frame or 2 of bees to check them. I would be quick, because you don't want them to chill. But the biggest thing is wind, especially if the hive is smaller, it's just building up. You just want to avoid the wind chilling the brood. But yeah, I mean, like even mid 50s, high 50s, if the sun's out, there's really no wind. You can open a hive, no problem. I've opened hives in minus degree temperatures real quickly just to see, if there's a cluster there or not. You obviously don't want to do that too much, but you can. Jeff asked, can I use brown sugar to feed? Another really good question. It is not advisable. Uh, Brown sugar just really has a tendency to give the bees the poops, for a lack of, I can think of another term, but giving them the poops is sufficient. It, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head why it does that. I want to say has something to do with some of the just the natural. I don't want to say impurities, um, but anyways, no, brown sugar you just don't want to use. White sugar is what you want to stick with. But that's a really good question because there's a lot of people who wonder about that, and there's been a few people who've definitely had tragedy with. There's been some semi-commercial guys too that have done that and paid for it dearly. So yeah, just stay with the white sugar. One other thing on that topic, and that is that in August you want to start feeding your bees and getting them ready for winter. So mite treatments and feeding. And the reason it's really great to feed your bees, preparing them for winter in August, is that you want to give them a thicker syrup so they have less work in evaporating the excess moisture. So that's why you go to a 2-to-1 mixture or maybe even a little bit thicker. But also, they can use all of that heat during that final summer month to evaporate. So, having them, it's one thing I love about having bees here. Up in Canada, we would oftentimes get late honey flows in August and whatever, and it kind of you really had to time stuff because, all of a sudden it's September, you could have snow mid-September, end of September. And so all of a sudden, you're trying to pull honey, you're trying to treat for mites, and you're trying to feed all within this 3-4 week period. It was insane. So here, August, in our area, we have to treat the mites and get the bees up to a really good wintering weight. And then really, by September, uh, kind of topping off what they're needing weight wise. And going into mid September, end of September, you should literally be in a position of not having to mess with your bees. Just go out there, maybe pop the lid every once in a while just to see what's going on. But from about mid September until really the beginning of December, we don't have that much to do with our bees. They should be, everything that needed to be done should have been done by mid-September. So guys, thank you all so much. And I want to do one of these again, probably around mid-July, end of July, because then we can start talking about just what needs to be done for the fall preparations and winter preparations. But I don't know about you. I don't even want to think about winter at this point. That's not something I want to even think about. I'm glad. Anyways, so I'm not even going to go there. Let's just say that I'm enjoying being outside. That's a great thing. Terry just sent me. When will you send out your treatment plan? You know what? Let me try and just do that in a email tomorrow. I'll send it out via the MailChimp doohickey, and a real simple calendar. And then we'll revisit again when we do this in around the end of July. But thank you all again for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your business. It was a really great year with nuke sales, bee sales again, and we just really, really appreciate that. And want to just continue to be a ongoing resource. It's you never stop learning with beekeeping. It's perpetual. And we really want people when they're doing business with us. We want them to feel that they have a partner that they're working with, that they're not just, buying bees and, hey, good luck, you need bees again, then call us. So anyways, no, thank you all again. You guys have a great evening. I'll send out that treatment schedule tomorrow. Anyways, catch you guys later.